flow we thought is going to be better. So where are we going in this framework and in this integrated approach? What is the philosophical debate we have inside regarding economic innovation? Is it the evolution of capitalism? Is it the birth of a new economical system? How are we positioning ourselves in this context? What do we have inside? What do we think about this? So please welcome our moderator, Natasha. Welcome.
Good morning.
So,
good
Natasha,
morning,
we thought if you were comfortable there or here, choose your place.
I'm comfortable anywhere.
And
What's the rule?
The stage is all yours.
Yeah. Over here. Good.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I see no one is having trouble with Athens traffic. I had. Hello, my name is Anastasia Giamali. I'm a journalist in Greece. I have no clue of the subjects we're talking about. Elena convinced me to come to talk about sustainability and cities and everything. In Greece, we're mostly focusing on how bad our political system and our politicians are, so we don't talk about sustainability, about climate, about how our cities will become more viable. So I have no clue. That's why I said yes. I wanted to learn more about the subject. So there is a debate that's going to happen here on impact economy versus well-being economy and how our cities can become better. Athens will have a lot to learn from this, but I see mostly foreigners, which explains a lot. I see only one person that I really know of who tries to make our cities better and lower the rents and deal with housing crisis, but still it's a process and we're losing hope. So I would like to call my speakers here. Where is Conchita Galdon? Hello, Conchita. Nice to meet you. Hi. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. And of course, Lorenzo Fiaromonti. Please, Lorenzo. Nice to meet you. You know the speakers better than I do. I will say that Conchita is the Vice Dean Business with Purpose at IE Business. What is that? Tell us a few words about it.
So can you hear me? Yes? Okay, here it is. So at IE Business School is an international business school in Madrid. And there I am I have two roles. On the one hand, I'm the Vice Dean for Business with Purpose, which means I'm responsible of all contents related to impact, sustainability, business with purpose in all of our programs, bachelor and master's. I'm, for example, the academic director of our master's in sustainability and business transformation. And on the other hand, I'm the director of our Center for Social Innovation and Sustainability.
And Lorenzo?
Hi.
Tell us about yourself.
I work in London. I'm directing an Institute for Sustainability, and I'm an ecosystem catalyst at Nativa. The team of Nativa is here. By the way, if you're representing an organization that wants to change and transform itself in line with what we're going to be discussing about, talk to the Nativa team here. They have a lot of methods and resources for you.
Lovely. Let's enjoy the debate, everyone. So, who does impact, who does well-being? Which one?
Technically, she does impact, and I do well-being, but we do
Okay.
both. We do both.
I'm more focused on impact, and he's more focused on well-being.
Good. Let's talk definitions then, for us that are not very familiar with the subjects. Let's start with well-being, and let's afterwards proceed to what impact is.
Go ahead.
Sure. Well, well-being, scientifically, now we know what makes us live well. And that is connections. So we're social animals. We thrive when we have good connections. Connections among each other and connections with the environment. Now, the problem is that our economy has done exactly the opposite over the past few hundred years. It has made us more isolated from each other and has destroyed the environment. So we tend to have very low levels of well-being. What we propose is a different model, a different format. An economy that produces well-being. Companies that work towards producing well-being. That is, improving our social connections, giving us more time and quality to spend with each other, and improving the state of nature. And I think this is very close to what we mean by impact, by the way. So, but that's the scientific foundation of that.
Conchita,
Yeah.
on the definitions.
Yeah, so I'll start by giving you a number, which is, 1,571 trillion US dollars. This is the amount of money disbursed in impact investment as per the Global Impact Investment Network. So it's shitloads of money, if you'll forgive my language. So when we talk about impact, I want to start with this number because it's not a niche. It's not my cousin and his friends. It's really a new way to think about the economic system, and it's bringing about systems change. According to Donna Lameros in her book, Thinking in Systems, which I would recommend if you're into systems thinking, a system is a set of elements, actors, that interact with each other for a goal. When you change the goal, you change the system. So, because what has been happening with our economy is that a company, theoretically, right, is an organization that because they generate value, they can legitimately capture part of the value they generate. But you first generate value, right? And because you're generating, you can capture. At some point, some companies forgot about that, and they turned it around, and they started thinking about capturing value before they think about generating value. And so some companies started thinking that their goal was to make money, which it is not. So the impact economy is about putting impact as the goal of the system, where making money is means to ends. Your company is a way to generate impact, to improve, to better the world, that in the process of bettering the world is making money, right? So it's creating a new normal, a new way of engagement, a new normal that should have never stopped being the normal thing. Because, we are gregarious animals, we belong to the environment, and it's not in our cells, it's not in our buildup, it's not in our genes to destroy each other and the environment. Mm-hmm. It's the opposite. So I'd say the impact economy, really, it's putting the economy where it should be, giving the economic system the goal it should have always had, and giving it a goal that is consistent with who we are as human beings.
I cannot see or understand the big difference between the two concepts. Probably it's just me, but I would like to insist. It seems that well-being is a very wide concept, a very wide idea. Would you like to elaborate a bit more as to what is its difference from the impact model?
Absolutely. I think the format of having us disagree is a good one, but honestly, we're part of the same process.
Yes.
Well-being is really helping us reorient ourselves. It's a simple language that everyone can understand. At some point, we all came together, scientists and activists from all walks of life. And we thought, what's a language that anyone can understand from the North to the South Pole? No matter where you're coming from, what your culture is. And the language of well-being works extremely well. It's grounded on African practices of Ubuntu, we're living together. Buen vivir in South America. The Asian value, Confucian values of, creating, takes a village to raise a child, and creating value together. Against this economy of alienation and isolation, with economic development and industrial development over the past 100 years, we have spent less and less time together. We spend more and more time in isolation. I live in London. London is considered a developed city by conventional standards. It is actually a very underdeveloped city by well-being standards. Loneliness has become a national plague. People die alone. Recently, a person was found at home after 2.5 years, dead.
2.5 years?
2.5 years, he was mummified. For 2.5 years, no neighbors wondered where this person was. No family member. This can only happen in a country where we live in isolation. And the same applies to our work-life balance, levels of stress, mental illness. We see them on the rise everywhere where you have economic development. That means that there's something wrong with what we mean by economic development, obviously, right? And this has an impact on how we run cities. Do we run cities for cars or for people? Do we run cities for shopping malls or for local family shops? Do we run cities for restaurant chains, for the Starbucks, or for the family-owned coffee shops? That's a decision. One generates well-being and can actually generate the kind of impact that Conchita was talking about. Impact, financial impact, but with many other positive impacts, which is what we want. Or do we want a more American lifestyle, which is not working, in my view, in America, and it's probably not working anywhere else? So these are some of the critical examples. How do you run a company to produce that? So it is general, but it is inspiring in my view. We need concepts that can easily work with anyone. I'm assuming that if I was to give a speech similar to this to someone running a shop here, they would get it. They would get it. It's practical. You understand, you can relate to that. Now we can discuss how that impacts how you treat your workforce, what kind of financial profit you want. We're all talking about generating profits, but quality profits. You can make some money while having positive well-being outcomes at the same time. Okay, so it's when Conchita said, generating value, and then capture part of it. But the value that you've generated must be higher than the value that you use in order to produce something. The food that you use to run your restaurants, the work, the time that people spend into producing certain things, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I would say that the well-being economy is a enabler of the impact economy, if you want to put it this way. So like the impact economy is broader, right? It's a bigger term. And the well-being economy, as Lorenzo was perfectly explaining, brings the human activation, right, around the impact economy. So if you want to convince people to protect the environment, which would be part of the impact economy, how do you convince them? Well, because it's better for you, right? Because it's better for your lifestyle. So there's a human activation around that. Why should someone change the farming practices, right? If maybe farming in the old way is cheaper for them. Well, you need to convince them it's better for you somehow, right? So it connects the impact economy to your health. So I find it interesting because what happens often with impact, especially with environmental impact, is human beings, we are built to overprice short-term over long-term, right? So we discount the long-term. So every gene, right, in your body, every cell in your body knows that surviving today is more important than surviving tomorrow. Because that's how we survived over millennia. So the problem that we have when we create a tension between environmental and social goals is that social goals eat environmental goals for breakfast every time. Because social goals are the problems of today. And environmental goals, for the most part, for a lot of people, remain the problems of tomorrow. Even if you believe that environmental matters are the problem of today, right? Like even if you see human disasters like what we're seeing in Spain these days with 100 people dead, children, babies, elderly people, like really vulnerable people dead in Spain, right? We're not talking Madagascar here. Even if you realize that this is the problem of today with 100 families mourning their death, they're dead today in Spain, you still always think, well, even if we start doing things to prevent climate change, which we can't prevent it because it's here already, but you can stop it from getting even worse, right? And you can adapt to what's going on. The effect is going to be later. But I'm hungry today, or I need a job today. So when you're able to explain environmental matters or social goals that don't necessarily affect you directly, like poverty in the world if you're not the one being poor, like inequality if you're to the good side, right, of inequality. When you're trying to explain to people impact goals that don't affect to them, and you want to prevent them from discounting their value because they occur in the future versus the immediate impact of what's going on with them, you make the argument about them. And if you're able to make the argument about them, you will live better. Your life will be better tomorrow, not 50 years from now. Your life will be better because you will be healthier. Because this food is going to be healthier for you and your children. Okay. Because you're going to be happier. Because if you get sick, someone will come see you, right? You turn that into well-being, and it's a very powerful activation to bring to the present what otherwise would be discounted as things to happen in the future.
Let's go now to discuss about the commercialization of the concepts. Lorenzo, people say, no, not people, some critics argue that the well-being is more of a marketing concept and less of an actual suggestion, of an actual full, complete proposal. How do you respond to that?
It's a real risk, obviously. I mean, like the risk of cooptation is right there with everything that works. Usually it was Mahatma Gandhi who used to say, at the beginning they ignore you, then they ridicule, then they oppose you, and then you win. So, and it's the same with well-being. At the beginning, they say like, oh my gosh, this is a lofty concept. It's never going to take root. No one is going to believe in this. Forget it. It's not practical. We are into the real business. You guys are philosophers. Then they started ridiculing us, like, oh, well-being is only for the leftists, these guys walking around in, like flip-flops and barefoot, and they don't really know how to run an economy. Then they started opposing us. When I became a national minister, I got elected into politics. Parties started embracing it. The government of Scotland, the government of Wales, the government of New Zealand. It became a bit of a wave. They opposed the politicians. I got kicked out of power. The Prime Minister of Scotland got undermined and had to leave politics. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, there was a massive opposition towards because they could see that it was actually transforming these countries, transforming the budget law. In New Zealand, the Prime Minister said, I want my budget, national budget, based on well-being principles, which means some companies are going to get less money, more tax, and some companies are going to get more incentives and less tax because they're producing good outcomes. That's revolutionary. That can really hit, like a strike, like important chords in the system. And now we win. Now we are winning. Now I think there is more and more companies. Look at the growth of benefit corporations around the world, B Corp, in different types of certifications. Companies are embracing sustainability wholeheartedly. When we talk about sustainability, we don't mean just the environment. We mean ourselves first. How do we sustain ourselves as a human species? Guys, I want to be very clear. The planet will be here for billions of years. Yeah. The planet gives no shit about us. We meant nothing for billions of years, will mean nothing for another few billions of years. The planet could care no less. I mean, honestly, we may leave no reasonable trace in this planet a million or 1.5 million years from now. No one will ever know that there was a species called humans or sapiens on this planet. The planet is fine. It's the humans that are being threatened. In Valencia, the system is fine. It's just people were dying. Okay, so we need to do it for ourselves. It's a social human sustainability that is at risk here. Now the European Union is embracing it. It's now telling companies you need to do sustainability reporting as a mandatory expectation for companies operating in the European continent. And now business is coming to the party. So I think, yes, it can be co-opted. Be aware of those who put, well-being here, well-being there, and they tell you that well-being is all about feeling better. It's all about yoga. It's all about mindfulness. No, it's about transforming the rules of the game and build a different kind of economy.
Yeah, I actually think
I have a different question for you, though.
But I want to react to that. It's very important what he's saying because people are using well-being as a tag, right? And it can be very damaging. The 20-step routine that you need to do before 7 a.m. And 1,000 sun salutations before you have your matcha tea, right before you meditate for an hour and a half. These things are labeled well-being. I have nothing against matcha tea, but if you read stuff that makes you feel bad, that's by definition not well-being, right? If these kinds of things, they're not necessarily good for you in the sense that they don't bring about the peace of mind that proper well-being should bring about. Also, there's a very superficial way of looking at well-being, which is a new way of obsessing people with their looks. Right now, they don't call it aesthetics. They don't call it you need to look good. Now they call it well-being, but it brings about the same kind of slavery. So I just want to make this difference between the kinds of things that Lorenzo is talking about and tons of crap that you see on Instagram that is labeled well-being. I don't know that any of that has anything to do with the kinds of things Lorenzo is talking about.
How can you achieve, though, well-being through impact economies, given that the fact that some critics say that it's a profit-first mindset still?
Well, no, within the impact economy, first of all, I have nothing against profit first. I'm an economist. I think, profit is a good thing, and it's one way to grow and to scale things up.
But if you do it for profit, you will need to do it cheaper. And if you do it cheaper, you will pay people less, you will care for the environment less, as long as it's cheaper, and as long as it produces more.
I fundamentally disagree with that statement because it assumes that production processes...
It assumes that we live in a capitalist economy.
No, it assumes that production processes are standard and they cannot be innovated. So the critical thing is, in order to achieve an impact economy, we need to innovate. We need to change the way in which we think about our production processes. So for example, if you take the garments industry, right? Fashion can never be sustainable, ever. Because fashion in itself, it consists of convincing you that, that shirt that you're wearing now, that color, that's 2023? Come on, that's so 2023, right? So fashion is about convincing you that something that you have, which works perfectly for you, actually doesn't work for you. It's a way to generate obsolescence, right? Obsolescence in a product, you can build it into the product, it can break, or it can build it in your mind. You think it's not good for you any longer, you need to buy something else. So forget fashion, but garments, clothes, right? The fact that you wear clothes, that can be sustainable. Now, if you think about the way in which clothes are being produced now, that can never be sustainable, whatever you do. Because of the production processes and the kinds of cost structures that then lead to the kinds of pricing that we have, right? And that are necessary because you need sustainability that is affordable. Sustainability cannot be for the rich. Sustainability needs to be for everybody. So we can't have sustainability by making everything always more expensive, right? And making everything luxury. So one way in which a production process can change is, for example, refibra. So now the textile industry is experimenting with refibra technology that allows you to turn your old clothes into new clothes by recycling the fiber and creating new fiber and new fabric out of old fabric. So the only way to make impact profitable, which it needs to be, let's be very clear, if impact is not profitable, it will not be, period, right? So the only way to make impact profitable is innovation, is really finding new ways like regenerative agriculture, in which Thanos works.
Sorry to interrupt, but
yes.
How do you stop Shein and Temu and Amazon and all these big chains to sell a T-shirt for $1 or €2 or €3? How will you convince governments and the European Union and the G7 and I don't know who to encourage, not to encourage actually, to impose and to regulate? This is my disagreement. How will you convince them to regulate so that we don't find a bargain in Temu?
They are being regulated. So I think all tools are necessary and they are being regulated. So for example, now in Spain, well, not in Spain, in Europe, and you will have it in Greece too, there's the new directive about, due diligence in value chains. So with the new directive about due diligence in value chains, all European companies and companies that have enough of their business in Europe, so also the chains of this world, they are responsible for the companies in their value chains, for their suppliers, and sometimes the suppliers of their suppliers, to abide by environmental and labor regulations as if they operated in Europe. And they're fined if that's not the case. So now, if you are Shein and you want to sell in Europe, you need to start working along these lines. There's also a lot to say about working with the demand side, right? And people understanding that it's not good for your skin, going back to well-being, to wear plastic all day. And you need to understand, it does damage your body to be wearing plastic all day. And these brands, that's what they're selling you. It's clothes that damage your skin because of the kinds of fabrics that they are using. And people also need to be aware of this. But again, if we advance enough in refibra, we can start sourcing material for garments from here, which is where the waste is. Right now, we're bringing cotton from wherever, traveling around the world, the cotton, right? And we're then sending our waste elsewhere to Africa. But if we do refibra and we can resource material from our waste, we don't need to be sending the waste to Africa, and we don't need to be bringing cotton from elsewhere. We can produce not so expensively in Europe with material that we already have in Europe of our own waste. So the whole concept of mining landfills, right, and finding material in landfills. So again, I think we need to change the whole system. It's not just about making tweaks to the present system. It's about rethinking the system as a whole, and some things just need to be regulated, as you say. It's the same in technology. Can Facebook ever be trusted to protect our children? No. It's going to have to be in a court of law that happens. They've had every chance and every opportunity. They have not protected our children. It's never going. So I think we need to separate the part that needs to be regulated, because there's never going to be a will on their side to do anything else, from the part that by innovating, you can make it reasonable and profitable for people to do things well.
Do you two agree with each other on how to do this?
Yeah, I completely agree, I have to say.
On the how, not on the
how.
need
Yeah, I agree.
of doing
I think Conchita just said, she said, like, the way you change is a menu. You change by, propagating a culture of well-being, right? We are doing this. We do it in schools. When I was the Minister of Education in Italy, we made it mandatory for our children, for our students, to study sustainability in schools because we still teach things that don't matter, and we forget to teach the things that matter. So, by having that in public debates, in conversations, I'm Italian. Most of you are Greek. We get it. We love the beauty of our places. I work in London, and I spend as little time as possible there because I think it's a terrible life. As simple as that. You may think, oh, but we're the first world. Fuck it, I want the third world if that's the first world. I like this. I like the weather. I like the beauty. I like the great food. I don't want to eat the same stuff everywhere that is tasteless and makes me fat like the average British citizen. So people get this message. They get it. They don't go like, I don't think so. I'd like to live in London. They say, no, I hate London, but I can make money there, First. Second, we could have these cultural debates. Second, the laws. The laws are not set in stone. We make these laws. At some point, we said, you know what? If you're a corporation and you produce a lot of environmental damage that we all have to pay for with our tax, if you pollute our bodies and our children, we don't mind. We're not going to charge you any cost for that. That was a human decision. Very wrong. Now, we simply say, you want to pollute, fine, but you're going to have to pay for it. You want to make us sick, fine, you're going to have to pay for it. Let's see if the product will be as cheap as it looks.
Exactly.
When you start doing something, it's called internalization of all costs, right? It's a simple process. We go to Amazon and say, you want to sell crap, fine, but you're going to have to pay the tax in order to help us fix all the damage. Guess what? That thing is not going to be cheap anymore. And then we go to the local producer and say, oh, but you're making something that is really good, and it's enduring, and it's sustainable, and you're hiring local workforce. Guess what? You're going to pay less tax.
Yeah.
Because the guys that produce the bad products are going to subsidize you. I'm telling you, many of us will go and buy local. Nowadays, we have a system that has been designed on the opposite. It's been designed to favor the big producers that produce a lot of damage to the detriment of the local producers. That's why it looks cheap, and that's why local stuff looks expensive. We want benefit corporations to pay less tax. Yeah. We want those that do the right sustainability procedures and produce locally and do like recycling, regenerating, to pay less tax, and the others to pay more tax. And this is happening. It's not the end of capitalism. It's good capitalism.
Exactly.
It's actually good capitalism. I mean, like I'm simply saying to you, you're doing a good job here. I help you with that. You're a business, right? It's not just Amazon. It's also the local businesses that matter. I think when you start doing that, people get it. Business people start going like, oh my gosh, finally, like we have a path ahead of us. We want to contribute to the well-being of our nation, of our city, of our community. We don't want to be seen as those taking money away. We want to actually reinvest in our communities. Politicians start getting it. Citizens are more happy. I think you can produce a very, very positive and virtuous cycle. And it's pro-business. I mean, on this, I agree with Conchita. I'm not going to leave this debate thinking, oh my gosh, those guys don't like businesses. We love businesses. We just want the good ones. Yes. And we want the bad ones to sort of change if they can. And I'm sure that they will. They will. But we can't simply expect them to change like this. Or even, many business leaders came to me throughout my career. And they said to me, you know what, it's great, but if you don't change the rules of the game, it's going to be really hard for my company to change because you know what? We'd like the system, the fiscal system to change. Yeah. But politicians don't make it different, and we are forced to do the same things all the time because we are in a sort of rat race in this system that is perpetuating itself. If you change the rules of the game, there'll be many, many companies that would finally say, oh, it's now time to embrace it. We're going to go down the road of becoming a benefit corporation that works on sustainability principles and takes care about profit as much as they take care about social and environmental impact.
I think one important tool for the impact economy to really take over the system, right, and for this system change that is happening already, because we tend to be pessimistic, but just think about 10 years ago and compare with now. Like, change doesn't happen in a linear way, right? It goes ups and downs. You need to see the trends. And if I look back 10, 20 years, the kinds of conversations that happened 20 years ago are not even okay now. Like the kinds of jokes people would make at coffee machines, 30 years ago, you get fired for those kinds of jokes today, right? Or for certain attitudes towards women. So change is happening. Like, the system is changing 100%, even towards the environment. Like the kinds of things that were done even just 15 years ago, it's unimaginable that those kinds of things produced with those pollutants would be sold in supermarkets today, right? So the system is changing. And we are seeing it every day it's just happening in front of us, which is something to celebrate. Now, a very important tool is measurement. And I think the new regulation, the CSRD, is going to make a big difference because of the taxing. What happens is, the moment you realize that bad companies generate public expenditure, because we are paying it, what they're not paying, we are, right? So if you are getting sick, the public healthcare system is paying for that, right? They are not. But if companies are more impact-oriented, they are protecting your health, so they are saving money. So it's even in pure economic terms, just like money terms, it makes total sense to charge less the companies that are preventing the public expenditure that comes with the damage. If you don't generate waste, we don't need to pay for that waste to be managed with our taxes, right? Who pays for the Athens waste system? You do, with your taxes. The companies that are polluting often don't, right? If they don't pollute, those taxes that you pay,
you could use for something else.
People could do something else with your money. You could even keep it, right? It wouldn't. So it's not always about like raising taxes for everything everywhere or reducing taxes for everything everywhere. It's about measuring what is the real contribution to society of each firm, and then taxing what is reasonable. Whomever is generating more cost should be covering for those costs. Whomever is offsetting...
So tax more the polluters?
Tax more the polluters and tax less those that are recycling, because they're taking away the need for the public expenditure. So it's, again, you go back to math, you go back to impact measurement, you go back to money, but it makes reasonable sense. It's not for the dreamers. It's not for the complainers. It's for the doers, right? And it's for people who know math. If you know math, if you like an Excel file, this will make sense to you.
Okay, let's continue. Let's talk a bit about the future. I'll ask you, Lorenzo, how can the well-being economy prioritize holistic, long-term societal environmental resilience?
Well, I think a well-being economy does that by its own...
By definition.
By definition, like it's what we have forgotten. Somehow we somehow believe that the economy is a separate reality. Okay, so we enter the economy when you go to work, and then you leave it when you come back home. The economy is just another way of being ourselves, right? And often it permeates everything we do. And it's crazy to think that most of our economy has such destructive impact, and then we need to do everything else, volunteering, community work, and get together to try and fix it. We need to have an economy that doesn't damage things in the first place. We need to have a system that would give us so much more time to spend with ourselves. We would have more quality in our ecosystems. We could save a lot of money. I am in favor of a small state in a certain sense. I think, if you've done damage, if you can prevent, you can reduce taxes, you can have more time for schools and more money for schools, for healthcare. If people don't get so sick, you don't even need to spend so much on healthcare. I mean, I usually use the UK as a bad example, but the US is also a very bad example. I grew up in the US, and they spend 20% of their GDP on healthcare. But they're sick all the time. That's why they spend so much money. That's why they have so many insurances, and insurances are very expensive. That's why Obama had to struggle for 7 years to have a shred of public health care, which is pales compared to what we have in Europe. And yet, they're sick. So the outcome is not really enough what is being produced by that system, because they don't focus on prevention, because they think it's all about treatment. While we should actually have more prevention, we should eat better, we should spend more time with each other, we should have a system that allows you not to get sick, not only a system that tells you if you get sick you can go to the doctor, which is important, but focuses more and more on eating well. Again, when I was a national minister, I did something very, very simple. I said, we need to have a good diet. So since I was the Minister of Education, I said, in my schools, vending machines will be forbidden. And of course, that was an atomic bomb. But this is so simple. Why would you want to sell crap and junk food to our children at school? That's to me is, to minors, that's to me is a terrible thing. Don't you think? You should have sandwiches. I didn't say you should have salads and, like organic or vegan food. I simply said, let's give them sandwiches. Let's make sure that they can eat local food, whatever it is, but not the vending machines. These are all things that allow you to build that societal resilience that we then care so much about only in times of distress, like what's happening in Valencia. Now everyone is saying, oh my gosh, we need to do something, then tomorrow we'll forget again. And we need to make sure that if we build again, and I'm appealing to the Greek audience here, you went through an economic crisis, a prolonged economic crisis. You are rebuilding a system from its ashes. Make sure that when you build it better. You don't simply make the same mistakes again. You want an economy that is resilient. You want money to be reinvested in Greece. The more space you leave to those coming from the outside, the more money will leave your economy and will go somewhere else. You want corporations that are based in Greece for the long haul, that are going to stay here because they love Greece, not because they can make money and then they're ready to leave any minute. Sorry.
In Greece, the main focus is either Airbnbs or tourism in general. The main aim is to be the place where all you come and enjoy your summer, and that's that. Mm-hmm. Nothing more than that. As far as I was looking in the morning at measurement, the purchasing power in Greece is now 28% less than it was in 2010, while the European Union average is 28% more. It's this discussion here. Sorry to burst the bubble. Is a very first world problem for Greeks.
I completely disagree.
Who try to pay the bills.
No, completely. These crises are generated.
I don't disagree with the concept.
No, I know.
I'm saying that we're talking a different language
here.
Let
me give an example. I lived for 20 years in Africa. Okay, so you would say, my gosh, how could you explain these concepts to Africans?
Oh, they understand it better.
They understand it very well. They said, look, we don't want to live in poverty.
Because it makes sense.
We don't want to have the kind of trash either. Yeah. We are now seeing, many friends from Nigeria would tell me, look, we're still poor, but we have mountains of trash already. So if we want to become as rich as you are nominally, how much trash are we going to have to put in our cities? Isn't there another way of becoming wealthy without destroying things? And that's what you start thinking about when you hit the bottom. When you hit the bottom, you wonder, why did I get here in the first place? What kind of economy brought me here within a matter of minutes? What kind of financial system did I have that allowed my country to evaporate in a few months? That economy was wrong. I don't want to replicate it. How do I build something different? And the purchasing power is also, I have less purchasing power in Italy than I would have in the UK, in theory. But that's rubbish, because the quality of my life is way better with that less amount of money. Even in PPP terms, I can actually get more. Because I have indirect income that is generated by my social capital. I have indirect income. We can have a conversation about that, We should not forget about it. When my American friends say to me, but how do you manage to live with 3,000 euros a month? I say to them, well, first of all, school is free. Free! Free schooling. My kids go to school, they learn languages, they do music, they have an orchestra for free. They go like, but I'm saving so much money, millions and millions of money that I have to save in my rich America just to send my children to university and be jobless anyway. For them, thinking you can actually study music for free is a myth. So in purchasing power, I'm poor. In real income, I'm wealthier.
And I wouldn't want to abandon that, just to embrace. And so how do you make sure that you can get there? You can save what's good about Greece and rebuild Greece in a way that makes it resilient.
Here we
without doing that.
privatize now. It's different. We privatize
But
the
even when
health
you
system. We
you can
privatize the
even when you
educational
privatize,
system.
you can privatize with a well-being approach. If a benefit corporation runs a school, we'll do it differently from a conventional corporation. If you're privatizing with those companies, it's one thing. If you're privatizing with conventional business, it's a different story. That's what Greeks must choose. And this is a good time to have a debate. What kind of private market do we want? We're all talking about the market economy here, but a market economy with different principles.
Exactly, a totally different market economy with different principles. And even, again, I think people in this room, right, and a lot of people are in the creative industries, we need to create a new normal. Even when we think about tourism, and don't take for granted that tourism needs to look the way it does. At the Center for Social Innovation and Sustainability, we have a project with Amadeus, an IT provider for travel industries, that is called Travel for Impact, which is a community of small business owners around the world that are doing regenerative tourism and sustainable tourism. And these are small companies. These are not the rich. These are little people that have like an eco lodge someplace in Tanzania. They will take you fishing in Vietnam.
To offer some perspective, this is lovely. In Greece last year, the main debate was whether it was okay for a waiter, a young boy in Rhodes Island, to serve in, imagine like a tray, of course, a tray that was going inside the sea up to here because people were floating in floating sunbeds. And the question in Greece was whether if he gets good tips, it's okay to work and go up to here inside the beach, inside the sea, and then outside.
But we're here to change that. We're not here
Yes,
just to
that's
complain about
lovely.
it.
That's lovely.
Right?
I'm saying that
Or
we are
what you
50
here
steps
for?
ahead
Are you
before
here to
that.
change that? Are you here to change that? Yes? Yes? Okay, that's what we're here for.
Look, let me tell you something. In America, there would be no debate about it. They would say, yes, of course it is. That's the difference. They're not even there. The fact that you wonder whether that is a good thing makes you special, makes you better than Americans. Americans would have no questions. No one would even say, oh, that's a violation of rights. They don't even get paid. Waiters don't get paid. They only work on tips, and they have no social security whatsoever. So the fact that you question whether that is acceptable to me means that you are way ahead.
I will have to
Ahead.
stop you to listen for the closing comment from Conchita. Sorry, Lorenzo.
No, I just want to close the circle and say, again, the impact economy is giving a new goal to the whole system. It's systems change that we're thinking about, right? It's not little things. It's not like it's not about is the plastic bottle 10% recycled. It's like, can we do without the bottle? It's not about, can we tip a little bit more or less in tourism? It's can we think about a new way of traveling, right? And getting value, and travel being an industry that really protects cultural and environmental heritage. It's about changing the system completely and setting a new normal, a new way of thinking of what is reasonable and what is not reasonable, and revamping the economy from that place, right? So I think I would like to finish with just asking everybody in this room to think about what is your position in the system, because again, a system is a set of elements, right? Agents, you and I, that engage with each other in a certain way with a certain goal. So what is each of our roles in the system? We are part of the system. If we change our goal, if we change the way in which we interact, the system will continue to change, and the system is changing already, right? So I think it's not the time for the complainers, it's the time for the doers, right? It's a time for the people who want to act upon change, with or without politicians, with or without regulation, right? It's for people who want to make change happen, and I think that's what this conference is for. It's for you who are here to make things happen and to make change happen.
Now, thank you very much for your comments. 2 questions. 1 question and another. We're on a first come, first served basis, please, yes. I don't think
Yes.
it's working.
The elephant in the room, and also about degrowth. What do you think about it? Want me to repeat? Oh, that's okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, hello everyone, I'm Marie. Just wanted to talk a bit more about, we talked about creating value, we talked about innovation, we talked about regulations, we talked about all of this, but we haven't talked enough, in my opinion, about redistributing value and about degrowth as well.
Yeah.
How do you position yourself towards this kind of new thinking in economic
Yes.
theory? Thank you.
Thinking.
There's another question.
And there is Elena είναι ο κύριος.
Hello, I'm an industrial, so technically I'm the lower end of the chain where we do the innovation, the math, the mechanics, the chemistry, and we know what's really sustainable, what's really green. If I were to label you, you're at the high consultancy side. Between us is what I like to term today structural corruption. Because for us to access finance, we have to prove that our work is green to the middle chain, which is the banks. And the bank's money is about risk management. They don't want to take any risk, so they want a consultant. The consultant have to sign a consultant. You go to ISO, and you end up filling a bunch of processes, and whoever is getting the money is not necessarily green or sustainable. It just can make the process right to get the finance. And this is becoming today the most problematic for the real change makers, and I'm one of them, to access funds. And we are seeing the billions you just mentioned at the beginning being funneled to huge companies only because they can find an excellent consultant who twisted the Excel sheets. And through my pitching, I'm a startup here. One time we were a bunch of startups, each very good at what we do, and we decided to play our consultants to make fake pitch decks, fake Excel sheets to see if it will pass. And surprisingly, it not only passed, they loved it. So we are authentic, we don't want to do this, but today we cannot access finance because if you want to sell the real genuine product we are making, it does not fill the structure, the tick boxes that the system you are in charge of managing is done. So how can we bridge this gap? If I sit with you for half an hour, I can sell you my product. If I sit in my bank, I can't sell anything.
Yeah, I think we need to redo the financial system, and it's happening. If, for example, if you were to go into an impact investor, the conversation would be different. But banks, unfortunately, commercial banks, for whatever it's worth, I spend a lot of time lately with risk managers in banks because they're beginning to incorporate climate risks in their loans. So they're beginning to understand that, if they give me a mortgage and my apartment ends up in the water, they lose the value of the apartment. So they're trying to incorporate risks on physical assets in these kinds of things, but they're beginning to get their head around these things. Like they weren't even considering these kinds of risks before. So for them, they don't realize that giving you a loan is less risky for them because you're a more resilient company than giving it to someone else. And until it just hits them that it's better business for them to give you the loan because you're a more resilient client, right, than another, it's just like the commercial banking industry. It's not a nice place to be for an entrepreneur that is doing sustainability because it's just like completely beyond them. They will analyze your business as if you were proposing a loan for a restaurant, and they can't tell the difference between a restaurant and what you're doing.
And on the first question, Lorenzo, maybe?
Yes, by the way, I agree on the financial part, absolutely. But some banks are changing, also commercial banks. We have cases in Italy, for instance, of banks where, again, there's a long history, I suppose, in many European, Mediterranean countries of banks that are rooted in their own communities. They're not simply operating in Switzerland, but actually, or with their offices in New York or London, but are actually rooted, that take these issues more and more seriously, and they go without consultants. You don't need to have expensive consultants to actually access funding, and they give preferential loans to companies that have a way of demonstrating, even informal way of demonstrating they're contributing to community well-being. On the issue of redistribution, when we talk about the taxation system, it's a form of redistribution. You take from who the pollutants and you give those business to business, but you are redistributing. In the well-being economy, sphere, we like talking about pre-distribution, which is, I think, a very powerful concept. How do you make sure the rules of the game are such that you don't have to take the money from the wealthy to give back to the poor, but the poor are not going to be poor. So that the system itself is not going to have the skewed distribution that you have to fix, but you try and build the rules of the game at the national level, for instance, or European level, in ways that money cannot be channeled in such an imbalanced way. On growth or degrowth, from a well-being economy perspective, it doesn't really make any sense to talk about growth. And honestly, this is an interesting thing maybe for historians. When this concept of growth was developed, because if you read Aristotle, it didn't talk about growth. It's not been part of our history. It's been developed, was developed about 100 years ago. 100 years ago. And they started saying, someone obviously started wondering, growth of what? And if I ask you growth of what, you don't even know what growth of what. No one knows. If I ask an economist, even a good one, growth of what? They would say of GDP, right? But then when you ask them what's GDP, they start waffling because no one really knows what's in that number. That's when we say growth. Yes, growth. We want growth of well-being. Why shouldn't we have growth of well-being? Well, growth of well-being means certain areas of the economy must go up, certain areas of the economy must go down, right? I mean, you wouldn't want to have a growth in the production of bombs unless you need it, right? So it's not like, oh, we're celebrating the growth of bombs. That's a necessary evil, perhaps, if you're at war, but in normal times, you'd be happy if expenditure on bombs was to go down, right? There's no reasonable human being would like to do that. The same applies to growth in many sectors. Growth of personal protection and safety. This is an obsession that many of us have in America, for instance, or in other countries where you spend so much money on protecting yourself against crime, in a normal society, you'd like to spend less and less on that because you don't really need it, and so on and so forth. So, growth of well-being helps make clarity about what you mean by growth.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have growth or degrowth. You simply have to have another type of growth of something different that doesn't damage the environment.
Let me give you an
society.
example with GDP, for example.
And with that,
and we will finish. GDP, for example, it measures production, right? It's a good measure of production, but that's what it measures, nothing else.
Production of everything.
Of everything, right? That means that in healthcare, let me give you the example of healthcare. If all of us get very, very sick, there will be a lot of expenditure in healthcare, and that will increase GDP. Now, if we spend money in prevention and we don't get sick, there will be less expenditure in healthcare, right? So GDP, the contribution of healthcare to GDP will go down. But we would all much rather live in the country where there's less GDP because there's less expenditure in healthcare because we're not sick that in the second. So I think, again, I just give you this example again because it's not about growing or not growing. It's about growing what? Right? And not being so obsessed with it needs to be GDP. Also not against it needs to be GDP. It's whatever it needs to happen in each moment, given planetary boundaries and given the social needs.
So, this is us. Thank you, Lorenzo. Thank you, Conchita. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was super interesting. Conchita is my boss in Madrid.